WIDR Kalamazoo, broadcasting for you.
Hello, and welcome to the Western News Review, where members of the Western Herald, the student newspaper on campus, talk the top stories of the week with WIDR host Daniel Ebo.
My name is Daniel Ebo, and I'm doing this with folks from the Western Herald. I'll allow them to introduce themselves, and we'll start the show.
Hello, I'm Cori Osterman. I'm the news editor over at the Western Herald. I'm a junior at Western, and I've been studying digital media and journalism.
Great. And the other lady?
Hi, my name is Nicole Morehouse. I'm also a junior studying digital media and journalism at Western, and I'm the lead news reporter over at the Western Herald.
Awesome. So obviously we have experts here in terms of journalism and anything that has got to do with the media. So let's kickstart the show with a story on the Western Herald's website and written by Cori Osterman, who just introduced herself, and she's a news editor at the Western Herald. And this story is captioned, Jemele Hill speaks on MLK Day. And the story was written on January 18, 2023. I'm just going to give you just a line in the story, which I find very interesting and which I think will spark an interesting conversation today. Well, so when you skip to like the fifth paragraph, she says that she went on to add that objectivity and bias are not interchangeable and not every story needs both sides to be shared. And this is where my emphasis is on that not every story needs both sides to be shared. I don't know what you think, Cori, you take this one, but when you talk about the work of journalists, right, there are times when, do you think there are times when, like Jemele Hill says, you need to be, as a journalist, not share both sides of the story? Do you think that happens? And what do you make of that in terms of objectivity of journalists as well? Well, people expect you to tell both sides of stories because you're supposed to be the neutral figure here. Do you get to a point where you decide that, no, I'm just going to share a one-sided story?
Right, so I just want to start off by saying I've been a fan of Jemele Hill for a while, and getting to hear her speak at Miller was one of the cooler things I've gotten to do for my job. But drawing that line of objectivity has been a revisited question in the journalism community since forever. It's come up in basically every journalism and communications class I've taken here. I'm sure Nicole can speak to that too. We've taken a couple of them together. But in short, reporters have a duty to write the truth and the facts without including any of their personal opinions, trying to remain unbiased, but that doesn't mean that there's two sides to every story. Sometimes the facts reflect only one side of things, and it's just not realistic to share both sides when the facts only show one. It's also impossible to remain completely unbiased. We're all human. We all have opinions, even reporters. But it's important that our readers don't know what those opinions are, and we report the truth of the matter and remain objective while we're writing.
That's interesting. And you look at examples, for instance, in the media in terms of some of the things that are happening around the world, and you can cite the example of what's happening in Iran, where people are protesting the regime for being suppressive in the wearing of hijab and all of that. In such an instance, then, how difficult is it to, for instance, say that let's listen to the side of the regime? I mean, we've been listening to the protesters. They are saying the morality police and all of that is suppressing them. It's suppressive to women's rights in terms of deciding whatever they want to do with their hair, and the regime shouldn't have a say in that. Don't you think we should be listening to the reasons why the Islamic regime, for instance, in Iran decides that let's ban wearing of hijab, which people are protesting against? Isn't their side of the story just as important?
I think there are two sides to this story, but it does depend on the reporter and what the angle of the story is there.
All right. So definitely in this case, and I agree what the angle of the story is. You're looking at a protest that deals with people who are being oppressed, so to speak. And so then it's usually the voice of the oppressed that as a journalist you want to echo, right? That's a very good observation, Cori. let's do more stories again let's stay a bit longer on Jemele Hill, and since Cori loves her so much, I'll stay on Cori before I come to Nicole. Another part of the story talks about how Hill details how many individuals do not often interact with people of color, making what they see on screen a module of what they are like, right? So essentially she's saying that what people see on their TVs about people of color influences their interaction with such people. And this brings into perspective the idea of media framing, right? So what is projected through the media about any group of people. And yes, in this case, they use people of color, but I believe it also applies to any other sect, as it were, in terms of how they are projected influences how people see them. Now, over all these years of integration in American societies, right, where you've had a society that seeks to be inclusive, which is very diverse. I've been here for some time and I've seen all sorts of people around here. Do you think that, is it surprising to you that after all these years of integration, people still form their opinion of other people based on what they see in the media? And I'm interested because you work in the media, and so you contribute to what other people see of others, right? So do you think it's surprising in America that people form such opinions based on what is in the media?
Yes and no. Hill spoke a lot about what media she consumed. She mentioned that she tends to watch TV while she's writing. She talked about how important it is, media in all of our lives. We are all constantly consuming media. And unfortunately, sometimes that just forms our opinions of other people. Sometimes that's a good thing. But a lot of times what we see in the media is how we think of a certain type of person if we don't know somebody like that. I think it's definitely prevalent. And as someone in media who's trying to create content, I would like to share the voices of everyone and anyone that I can.
That's good. And I mean, as an aside, I remember last week in class, one of my colleagues was talking about, doing a research on how when people look at romance as portrayed in movies, right, they have expectation of their romantic partners in the same light because then they are influenced by what they see. But I like your perspective really on the kind of media you consume and then the content also thereof. Away from MLK Day, and let's do some Western specific stories. And I know the Western Students Association has been in the news last week as well. They've been going about one or two things. And so I'll come to Nicole, and then you share, if you will, some of the stories that are associated with the Western Students Association within the last week.
Yeah, so I have a story here from one of our staff reporters, Ian Russell. WSA meets every week, and Ian covers their meetings every week, and we released that story. So this one that I'm looking at is about some changes that were made to the Constitution, including changing the wording to make it more understandable for students, but also they have recently switched from how they decide a winner in their elections. So I'm just going to read a piece from that story. It says, additionally, it changed the way elections were won from majority to plurality. Previously, to win an election, a candidate was required to gain above 50% of the total votes cast. Under the new plurality system, a candidate instead would only have to gain the highest percentage of votes, even if that is not above 50%.
Interesting. Let's start from where you ended in terms of the way arena is selected, and then we'll get to what people should expect in this year's election or what the elections have been in previous years. With the way elections are going to be decided in terms of the majoritarian one, which is 50+1, which is being changed now to plurality 1. What do you make of that? Do you think between these two, what are the pros and cons that people should be expecting of? Because for me, I believe that for a majoritarian rule or way of deciding election is much more representative of who actually has the greater majority of students supporting them, right? So if you have in an election where people get just one vote ahead of their opponents, they are in a sense a majority, but that is not really a majority that reflects the total number of people, like the greater number of people that support a candidate, for instance. So the priority one for me has that con of not really deciding an actual majority in an election, whereas when you have a majoritarian one, you are sure that more than 50% of the entire student body supports this person, and that, in my opinion, is much more representative. But what do you make of these two instances where one allows you to have more than 50% of the student, and the other says the first past the poll, whoever gets the first majority, even if it's by just one vote, is the winner?
Yeah, so there's obviously always two sides and some pros and cons to any decisions that a government body can make. Like you said, majority system will, it would be representative of how most Western students feel and how they want to decide. But if, like, looking at the majority system, it could save potentially time in trying to figure out who should be elected to a spot.
Okay, that's interesting. Cori, you can feel free to jump in. And Nicole makes a good point about time factor in terms of the new system that is being proposed. Obviously, the majority system has its own benefits, but when you look at time, then that becomes a benefit also for the plural system, right? Do you agree?
I do, yeah. I think Nicole made some good points in saying that there's pros and cons to the situation. And I just want to say that we, as the Herald, like I mentioned before, journalists pride themselves on remaining objective. And our job here, and Ian's job when he covers the WSA elections and meetings, is to remain unbiased and just report what happens without putting his opinion into those stories.
Right. And in terms of the upcoming elections, you have been here and have been observing elections as journalists for at least a year now. What can you tell us about what students should be expecting? First of all, what has it been like in previous years in terms of the election? How competitive has it been? How engaging have students been in terms of voting and participating in the elections? And then you can also share what they should be expecting this year.
Right. So both Nicole and I were following pretty closely last year. Things got pretty competitive. There were some issues towards the end with demerits on both sides, and it was confusing for a minute there. People didn't know which team had won. They were trying to combat each other. The debates were pretty heated.
Wow.
But in the end, as we move from that, Ian told me that the demerit system is important to watch because they recently made some changes to it. So whatever happened last year is going to be different this year. So it's something to pay attention to, definitely.
Interested. Nicole, talk to me about what students should be expecting in terms of the campaign season, which I'm sure will be approaching or entering anytime soon. In terms of what issues should this election be focusing on? Should this election, some of the candidates be paying attention to as far as students on Western Michigan University's campuses are concerned?
Yeah, I think one issue that has been kind of at the forefront of people's minds and conversation lately has been safety around campus. There has been concerns with safety around like cars and how safe it is to walk around campus and not have and just worrying about being safe. So I think that's one thing that will be talked about a lot, and solutions will try to be found to make students feel more safe on campus.
Great. And I imagine that candidates who are able to properly address an effective way of combating the safety issues are probably going to win the hearts of the students. And that's amazing. And I look forward to the election season. Away from the WSA, let's look at the new student center. And it's a beautiful edifice. I've seen it. And I still don't understand why it's closed. Are there any stories, first of all, Cori, with regards to the New Student Center? I understand there are some stories, right?
There are. A couple weeks ago, I wrote a story titled WMU Shares Long-Awaited Student Center Update. That came after an email we got from the university a few weeks ago. My lead here is the construction team on the new student center has made progress as large portions of 2 floors are close to completion. This story went up on our website and is also in the print edition of our newspaper. But we found out that most of the materials that were needed are now in possession and they're making good progress on the installation, but we have yet to know when it will be officially open.
Okay, that's good to know. But what do we know really about the Student Center? What is it? What's the building? I know it's beautiful and all of that, but for someone who doesn't know what the new Student Center is, can you share insight as to what is it? What purpose is it supposed to serve?
Right, so everything that's in the Bernhard Center right now will essentially be moved into the Student Center. All of the registered student organizations, the big meeting spaces, the Western Herald and WIDR, just everything that happens in the Bernhard Center. I think there will also be a dining center in there. But basically, it was originally meant to open in the fall of 2021. Okay, I just forgot how to read for a second. So sorry. The Student Center was originally meant to open in fall of 2021, but construction was delayed in May of 2020 due to the pandemic. Now we're sitting in the back half of January 2023, and it is still not open.
But what issues really, how do you think this does it even affect students in the first place? I was going to ask, how does it affect students? But first of all, does it affect students in terms of the delay? Does it affect anything student-wise?
It does, mostly RSOs, registered student organizations, the Herald and WIDR included. Basically, they were all meant to move into that new center and get a space there. The Herald actually was set to move out of our space in the basement of Fonts over the summer, and we cleared everything off the walls. There's basically nothing left in our office, but we have yet to move. So it looks pretty drab in there right now, and we really hope to move pretty soon. But yeah, all the other student organizations on campus will hopefully have a space in there to talk and to use, have people come in and out. It's supposed to be very open. And other than that, everything that happened at the Bernhard Center, all of the panels, discussions, WSA meetings that happen in the big ballrooms in the Bernhard also are supposed to move to the new student center.
Wow, I can imagine the inconvenience exactly for you who had to clear out your office in anticipation of the opening. But it's been great having the top stories. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me for this discussion. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure for our listeners, you've at least had a peek into what happened, what's happening really at Western Michigan University. So we've talked about the Martin Luther King Day and some of the comments that award-winning journalist Jimmy Hill has made. We've also looked at the Western Students Association and the upcoming elections and what are some of the things you should be expecting and how it has been over the years, and as well as just ended discussion was on the Student Center and why it's not opened as of now. I was joined by Nicole, and she is the news editor, beg your pardon, of the Western Herald. And I made a mistake.
Yeah, you flipped us.
Yeah, I flipped that. I was joined by Cori Osterman. She is the news editor at Western Herald, and then Nicole also joined me. She's also the lead news reporter at Western Herald. My name is Daniel Ebo. This has been the first episode of the Western News Review. Each week we come your way with top stories that you may have missed in the previous week. And so thanks for making time.